Here are your Court News Ohio top stories in 5 minutes. The Ohio Supreme Court ruled a Hamilton County father does not give up the right to consent to his child's adoption for failure to provide maintenance and support after receiving a court order that relieved him of the obligation to pay child support. In a 4-3 decision, the Supreme Court ruled that a court order given to a man while in prison allowing him not to pay child support supersedes any other legal requirement to financially support the child. Under Ohio law, a non-custodial parent must consent to an adoption, but that right is lost if the parent either fails to have meaningful contact with the child or to provide for the child financially within the year before the proposed adoption without justifiable cause. Since the natural parent wasn't paying child support, the boy's stepfather believed his petition for adoption didn't require consent. In the court's majority decision, Justice Sharon Kennedy wrote that Ohio parents are subject to a general legal obligation to support their children, but when there are court orders for child support, those orders establish the parent's obligation of support. As part of the minority dissent, Justice Melody Stewart argued that when a judicial decree relieves the parent of the obligation, the duty of support imposed by state law still exists. A probate court then must decide if the parent still had justifiable cause not to provide support before deciding if the parent lost the right to consent to the adoption. Every Friday inside Courtroom B at Delaware Municipal Court, Judge Mary Ann Hemmeter closes out her work week with a select group of people. A prosecutor for nearly 2 decades, she never thought she'd be a judge, let alone one presiding over and operating a vehicle under the influence court.
I thought specialized dockets were hooey. It's kumbaya, we're giving people a pat on the back, they need to go to jail.
But after being appointed in 2015, she had no choice. The wheels were in motion for the probationary program even before she was on the bench. What she discovered was something you won't learn in any criminal handbook.
We get to know these defendants. Sometimes they have to bring their kids to court. We see them more often.
And Judge Hemmeter also got a better understanding of the complex issues that her OVI Court participants face.
My job as a therapist is to put the mirror up and challenge you on some of those things.
Tasha Taylor seemed as hopeless as any case the judge ever handled, until the defendant finally took note of a problem that plagued her for years.
With my mom passing from the alcoholism and just my kids being there for them and having them see me actually be there.
With the support of the court and her family, the mother of 3 finally got her life turned around.
How long have you been clean?
Since last year, January 1st, I've been sober.
Excellent.
After an arduous road that lasted 2 years, Taylor got a sweet send-off at her graduation.
Congratulations. You've made it. I'm going to give you a hug, and I never hug.
When one of them really does succeed and stays sober and addresses the underlying cause of their addiction, you see it. It makes your day.
Every 2 weeks, Mansfield Municipal Court Judge Jerry Alt sits down with his team to discuss one of his 4 specialized dockets.
Yep, he's been doing very well.
Up and running since 2008, his domestic violence court was a culmination of his 21 years as a Richland County prosecutor.
I tried, probably 15, 18 murder cases, and about half of them involved domestic violence.
Since the program's implementation, he's learned a lot of things about the crime over the past decade.
The fact that both victims and offenders often have PTSD.
By his accounts, about 80% of his defendants deal with post-traumatic stress disorder or a trauma-related issue. Some of the causes include abuse as a child or witnessing such violence at home, which often leads to a vicious cycle as adults. So court personnel and treatment providers collaborate to get to the core of a defendant's disturbances through education,
soak in all the information that they give me and, just trying to use it at home.
And realization.
What are you learning?
It meant how to deal with my emotions and express them better.
Judge Alt will continue to educate himself on PTSD for the people who come before him and staffers too.
I continue to read on the subject. I have contact with the counselors, and we discuss the issues they face all the time.
And that's a look at Court News Ohio's top stories. Visit courtnewsohio.gov for the latest headlines on Ohio's courts. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter.